Hello and welcome today to the Christian Construction Podcast. We want you to stay tuned for this important episode. Today we'll deal with the subject of suicide. All right, welcome back to today's episode. Thank you again for tuning in and for being so faithful to listen and to be a part of the podcast family. I want to also encourage you, if you've not had a chance to go back and see the episode from last week. If you've already seen it, can I remind you, please share that, get that out to where some friends may see that, and it may encourage somebody to begin to realize the importance of voting and getting out to the polls. So I want to encourage you to do that. Thank you for tuning in today. Brother Keith, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How you doing, Brother Michael?
I'm doing pretty good. You're wearing the same thing you were wearing last week.
I only have about 4 of these. So.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'm wearing the same thing I wore, except this time I have a jacket on. So
y'all weren't supposed to know that. He relayed that information voluntarily.
I can't help it. I'm wearing the same thing 2 weeks in a row. So, Brother Matt, how are you doing?
I'm good.
You look real
good.
classy there with your
Like that?
sports coat.
I'm going to sit on the stool the next time I preach.
Yeah, with a glass pulpit.
Yeah.
No.
I have a fog machine at home.
There you go.
Need some purple lights.
We have a fog machine up here. We use it to spray the sanctuary for COVID. So maybe these guys that's in that kind of going that way has this something to it. Maybe they're spraying for COVID during the service. That might be what it is. I don't know. All right.
They got a bigger disease than COVID going on.
Yeah, COVID's the least of their worries. All right. Well, we appreciate you tuning in today. We do want to take just a moment also and mention that this is a ministry of the Love Valley Baptist Church. Our pastor is Barry Philbeck. And again, as we say, oftentimes we do appreciate the building, the property, the equipment that we're able to use that the good people at Love Valley have afforded us. We do want to encourage you to continue to keep up with us as we are getting some new things located and ready, new guests and stuff ready to come in and cut some episodes here over the next several weeks. And so we encourage you to continue to tune in and be a part of the podcast, watching these episodes, sharing them, and encouraging other people that you know to watch them as well. Well, today we want to talk about something that is it's an issue, it's a topic. We mentioned this, I guess, last year when we first kind of set out on this journey starting the podcast, and that is a subject that you don't hear much said about, and that's the subject of suicide. It's a touchy subject. It's a subject, a topic that has probably touched every family in some form or capacity. We know, obviously, we know those who have been affected by death in general. Everyone's been affected by death in general, but I don't think there's a person today that's not been affected in some form or capacity by suicide as well. And so we want to talk about that today. One of the verses that I want to use as a to kind of launch out to the importance of life and the value of life, and maybe it would be an encouragement to someone, is found in Psalm chapter 139. This is what the psalmist said. He said, "For thou hast possessed my reins, thou hast covered me in my mother's womb." So he's making a reference to his beginning of life, and he says in verse 14, "I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well." The psalmist said that he was fearfully and wonderfully made, and that the workings that God had worked are marvelous works. Now, don't misunderstand, our nature is a flawed nature. We have a sinful nature. It don't take you much waking up in the morning and walking down the hallway to realize that you have a sinful nature, just like I have, we all have. But as far as the fact that God made us, that He made these bodies, He designed our bodies, He designed our personalities. He knows and knew, He did know, and He knows today, currently, what we are, what we're going to do, what we have done. And He made us. He didn't make us to sin. He doesn't want us to sin, but He knows us, and He made us. And to say that we are worthless or that our life is of no value is nothing more than a trick of the devil, and it's an issue that needs to be dealt with. And today, that's one of the things that we want to talk about. I can count on one finger the messages from a pulpit that I heard concerning the topic of suicide. And just to be honest with you, the one message that I did hear about it was not very impactful. I don't remember much about it. I just remember the preacher that got up to preach. It was in a meeting with several other preachers. He preached on that subject, and it just was not an impactful message. As a lot of messages that are true and are right may not always be impactful. Brother Keith, how many times have you heard in your life, and you've grown up in church, how many times have you heard a message solely on the subject of suicide?
Just like you, I may have heard one. I don't recall who it was or where it was. Right. So I would have to say, just like you, it wasn't very. Nothing about it stood out to me, right. And it don't to this day. But I would say that I probably have heard one over the years.
Brother Matt, how about you? Have you heard any preaching?
Never heard one.
It's amazing. So today, that's one of our aims, one of our goals is to kind of tackle the subject of it.
I don't know that I've heard it mentioned.
Wow.
I've been in a lot of preaching. Grew up in a pastor's home. Yeah. You know, I made been in a lot of camp meetings, jubilees, revivals, whatnot. I don't know. I may have and just don't remember, but I don't know that I've heard it mentioned.
Kind of like I have heard and a preacher in passing saying adultery is wrong, drunkenness is wrong, committing suicide is wrong. You know, in that regard, I have heard that. That's been the depth of anything I've heard in the pulpit concerning suicide. And I'm not faulting preachers for not dealing with it. Well, I'm just saying we haven't heard many messages on it. We want to give you some statistics. We're going to go through and talk about some of the examples in the Bible of men or of people that committed suicide. There's not but a handful, and even a couple or maybe one or two where it was contemplated, but then there was a different outcome. There are some general statistics, and all of these are statistics that we pulled off of public health websites. One was from the National Institute for Mental Health. Some of these are from the CDC, and so these are, best I can tell, up-to-date statistics from different health organizations. The general statistics of suicide. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States for all ages. Every day, approximately 123 Americans die by suicide. There is one death by suicide in the U.S. every 12 minutes. That means in the course of this podcast, there'll be 3 suicides committed. Depression affects 20 to 25% of Americans ages 18 plus in a given year. Suicide takes the lives of over 48,300 Americans every year. The highest suicide rates in the U.S. are among whites, American Indians, and Alaska Natives. Only half of all Americans experiencing an episode of major depression receive treatment. And so you can see the theme of this is that most people that commit suicide, it's specifically linked to depression. 80 to 90% of people that seek treatment for depression are treated successfully using therapy and or medication. And there again, while that sounds like a good number, on the flip side of that, some people are using medication for what I would say are probably spiritual problems.
Sure.
It says that an estimated 250,000 people each year become suicide survivors. There is one suicide for every estimated 25 suicide attempts. There is one suicide for every estimated 4 suicide attempts in the elderly. And so those are some general statistics. The one that really stands out to me is that there is one every 12 minutes. And when you think about that, that is a sobering thought that in the course of an hour, there will be 5 suicides in a course of an hour. Let me give you some global statistics. Nearly 800,000 people die by suicide in the world each year, which is roughly one death every 40 seconds. That's globally. Suicide is the second leading cause of death in the world for those ages 15 to 24. I think the leading cause is the common cold. I believe that's right. But
Wait, it's not
among
COVID-19?
ages, do what?
It's not COVID-19.
It's not COVID-19. And that is for those ages 15 to 24. And then let me also talk about the gender disparities. There's some differences here between the males and females. Suicide among males is 4 times higher than among females. I was actually a little shocked by that. Male deaths represent 79% of all suicides in the states. It says that firearms are the most commonly used method of suicide among males. And then it says that females are more likely than males to have suicidal thoughts. That, again, is something that's understandable because of how women are just they're more mental, they're more emotional in that way. And then females experience depression at roughly twice the rate of men. Females attempt suicide 3 times as often as males. So get this, while the males make up for 79% of United States suicides, the females attempt suicide 3 times as much as the men attempt it. And then it says that poisoning is the most common method of suicide for females. And so those are some of the gender disparities. The age disparities are 1 in 100,000 children ages 10 to 14 die by suicide each year. 7 in 100,000 youth ages 15 to 19 die by suicide each year. And then nearly 13 in 100,000 young adults aged 20 to 24 die by suicide each year. The prevalence of suicidal thoughts, suicidal planning, and suicide attempts is significantly higher among adults aged 18 to 29 than among adults aged 30 plus. Now, I want to stop right there, and I think that's an important stopping point. Ages 18 to 29, it said that it is significantly higher in that age group than it is people aged 30 plus. Brother Keith, what do you think is the reason for that age group, which would be y'all's age group? Why do you think it would be higher? Briefly tell me, why would you think it would be higher in that age group than it is once you hit that 30?
I have never struggled with anything pertaining to this. I would say that there comes a point, maybe especially right there after you graduate high school, where I believe every person kind of goes through it, where you're asking yourself, now what? Yeah. What's happening? What do I do next? And it seems like the longer, if you stay or if you get to that point, and the longer you stay there, the more likely you are to keep going down and almost into like a depression kind of state. And I could say that that the longer a person doesn't know where they're going to end up in life is probably, I would say probably, because I was there. I was in a place right after high school where I said, okay, and I was saved. Yeah. I said, now what? And it's a little bit harder for us because we want to do what we believe is the Lord's will. So we're praying and we're seeking the Lord's will. But we still ask ourselves, well, now what? What happens now? Do I go to college? What is it? What does my life hold for me from here on out?
Brother Matt, you want to speak to that for just a moment?
I believe, I sort of feel the same as Brother Keith. I don't recall that thought ever crossing my mind, but just the times that I have felt some sort of depression. I don't think I've ever been depressed, but any sort of depression, I would say at that age group, it would be attributed, I would believe, most to failed expectations.
Yes.
Whether expectations put on yourself,
sure, or
expectations put on you by a family or put on you by leadership, whatever that leadership is. I think about myself. When I was 18 years old, I don't believe anything that I am today was my goal. Right. I love the life the Lord's given me. I have a wonderful wife, a wonderful church, and a good job. The Lord has blessed me, but it wasn't my goal. Right. None of this was really what I looked and said, this is where I want to be at this point in time. Now, I believe you can take that's the thing. A lot of it's a choice.
Yeah.
You know, you can take disappointment many different ways. You can take disappointment and, you know, soak in it and allow it to discourage you, allow it to disappoint you, or you can take disappointment and use it as fuel to get to where you want to be. So I look at it from a mindset of, I believe a lot of them may have, that thought may have crossed their mind, or they may have attempted or successfully done so simply because they felt like they failed themselves.
Yeah.
But something now that I'm married that I could see, probably the most disappointing times in my life now are not when I seemingly fail myself, but when I fail my wife, when I disappoint her, when, you know, that I'm not able to do something for her that I want to do, you know, whether that's financial or, you know, whatever it is, emotional. I feel like I'm not able to meet her needs in that area. So I could see that now as a married man, you know, maybe that being so much, you know, I was looking, let me see if I can find that again. I was looking right here at the leading causes of what they believe to be, you know, the biggest reasons, I don't know if I still have it here or not, the leading causes for suicide, why people do it. And one of the reasonings that was listed, one of the top 5 reasonings, was home loss.
Yeah.
No, another one was job loss. A lot of financial things, you know, where you feel like I'm failing my family, so they would be better off if I wasn't here and someone else could take care of them better. Someone else could supply their needs better, or maybe my wife will marry someone with a better job if I'm not here. Something of that nature. So expectations that, you know, you put on yourself, expectations you feel like many times your family doesn't even put it on you.
Sure.
You just think they do. You get in your mindset that my family my wife expects this, my kids expect this, or, you know, just leadership. You know, people that are either looking up to you or that you're trying to please, whether that's, you know, your pastor. I've heard stories now. I've never experienced this in my life, but I've heard stories of young men that were given so much in the church just to please everybody else that they, you know, emotionally they weren't taking care of themselves. They were seemingly doing a good job spiritually, but they weren't doing so well in other areas of their life, and they let those things build up and build up and build up. And you know, I would say that's something that we all I would say for myself, you know, I don't know that I'm so careful about, is a lot of times I've made the statement, well, that ain't never crossed my mind. I ain't never thought about it. Well, that's not really that big a deal. I may not have, but it's important to somebody else. Everybody takes situations differently.
Sure.
You know, honestly, I got laid off. You men know this. I got laid off during this pandemic, and it put me and my wife in a difficult place financially. But in that, I expected myself to be the strong one.
Yeah.
But I took it a lot more difficult than my wife did.
Sure.
You know, I expected me to be the one that was just, everything's going to be fine. The Lord's going to take care of us. It's easy to say that until it happens.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and I expected myself to be the one that did that, and me to have to, you know, be there and support and be the strong one for my wife. But it was opposite. You know, I was the one that worried and I was panicking. The reason was I felt like I was failing.
Yeah.
I felt like, you know, me and my wife, we just been married. At the time that I lost the job, we'd only been married for, you know, 9 months. And here I am, I get laid off, and, you know, I was kind of just soaked in the depressed state. But my wife was the one that said, hey, everything's going to be fine. We ain't in trouble. The Lord's going to give you a job. And she was the strong one. So a lot of times we gotta be, I believe we must be conscious about, you know, what a difference what we say can make.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I told you I love my wife's husband. I love him to death. You know, I've never thought about committing suicide, but I don't know what I would have thought about if, you know, my wife would have told me, I can't believe you let this happen. I can't believe this is happening to us. The Lord, if she would have, I think about Job's wife, curse God and die. If she would have gotten that mindset that, you're making a mistake, God's not treating us right, you don't know what you're going to do until you're in that situation. So
I think another thing concerning the age, that 18 to 29, and I think you kind of mentioned this, Brother Keith, is that having purpose.
Right.
And I think that's kind of plagued our generation. Is everybody, I say our generation or that age group, is always going to be, what's my purpose? Thankfully, I got saved at 18 years old. So immediately, I had something to live for, something to look for. Brother Matt, you were already saved. Brother Keith, you got saved before that. So when you get to that, yes, you feel the pressure, but because you know that you're living for the Lord, I think it relieves a lot of that. Just like you mentioned, not being married very long, losing your job, all that plays a part. And then I think another thing is, you mentioned home loss, job loss, the security that the world can offer. It can send you into a tailspin.
Here's that list. I just not to interrupt, but here's that list, and you can bounce off of this.
Okay.
The top 7 reasonings are they say the factors contributing to suicide include relationship problems, crisis in the past, or upcoming 2 weeks. I thought that was interesting. Something that had just happened in the past 2 weeks, or something that's gonna happen in the next 2 weeks that you know about. Problematic substance abuse. Any substance abuse is problematic, by the way, not just problematic substance abuse. Physical health problems, job or financial problems, criminal or legal problems, and loss of housing.
So there's a lot in there.
I think about
try to unpack.
I don't know that you can relate to this, but I think it at that age and younger, I put a lot of pressure on myself.
Yeah.
And I think that coming out of high school, I think that it's pretty common in my age group to put a lot of pressure on ourselves to succeed, and we want to succeed. Being saved is one thing. We want to succeed spiritually, and but being physically, we want to succeed also. And then anything adding to that pressure that we put on ourselves feels like it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
When we're not succeeding, we feel like we're buckling.
I think another thing with that age group, our age group, that I know this because I am that age. I would say a lot of it's a jealousy thing.
Yeah.
Brother Keith's talking about putting a lot of pressure on yourself. Well, you put a lot of pressure on yourself to get this, get that, get here, get there, and someone else is doing it in front of you, and you're watching, someone you grew up with, someone that you're friends with, whatever it is. Social media, I believe, has a lot of. I would love to see. I would love to see a statistic on how much of a difference social media has had, or what a growth there's been in suicide since social media
since
come
that's
around.
Been introduced.
Because social media, you only see the good things. The people don't share, the bad things in their life. They share the good things going on. Well, but because of that, it gets in our mind, I don't have that new truck. I don't have that new house. I don't have that new pocketbook. She always, and girls, they'll get in their mindset, well, that girl always gets this. That girl always gets to go do that. Or guys, we work. I know as a 24-year-old man, it's difficult sometimes when you work and work and work and work and work, and seems like you don't get anywhere financially. And then other people many times are handed things. They get the job that they didn't go to college for. They didn't do anything to get it. Someone just gives them that job, and things just fall into place for them. And the right attitude to have in that is to say, thank you, Lord, for taking care of them and doing something good for them.
That's right.
But it's difficult. It's not always easy to do that.
Well, you mentioned that about social media. I'll just take my wife, for instance. She's at home all day, 4 kids. She's homeschooling. It would be real easy for her if all she did was sit around looking at social media and see so-and-so, well, they've got it a lot better than me, and they do this and they do that, and they've got this going on.
They're always on vacation.
And they're always on vacation. Me, I could care less about vacation. It don't bother. But then at the same time, you take a man who really takes pride in taking care of his family, and he has goals, and he has things he wants to accomplish, but he can't ever seem to get ahead. But he sees the guy he grew up with, like you said, new truck, new car, nice house, has all the toys, out on the lake on Saturdays, And that really weighs, and again, I think it would be amazing if we could find a statistic that dealt with that right there. I think also the mention of depression is in these statistics, but I think Brother Barry Rackley really put some things in perspective a couple years ago. For me and my wife, we were listening to him at a meeting, and he mentioned about discouragement. So oftentimes, depression is a very real thing. I'm aware of that, and I have some friends who battle that, and I don't make fun of that. But I think a lot of people have mistaken discouragement as depression. And discouragement is a choice. Yeah. David said, I will encourage myself in the Lord.
That's right.
You choose to be discouraged. And I think a lot of times when people are claiming depression, it's nothing more than discouragement. And that can be fixed by simply putting your eyes, your heart, your mind on the Lord. So I think there's a danger in just chalking it up. Everybody's got ADD and everybody's got all these other problems. And the reality is we probably don't have near as many problems as we think we have. We just need an excuse to be able to say we're the way we are. And I think that's where a lot of people are at. They've fallen prey to the mentality of I'm depressed when all it is discouragement. All right, as far as the age disparities go, and we're running out of time, we're going to give you a few things here and be done. Again, the second leading cause of death for 15 to 24-year-olds is suicide. That's Americans. The fourth leading cause, remember, the 10th leading cause of death in the United States for all ages is suicide. But the fourth leading cause for death in adult ages 18 to 65 is suicide. Let me go down here and deal with one more area, and this is kind of a touchy area, but I think it's important. I think it's important for people to hear and to see. There is a section on this website, which was the National Institute for Mental Health, addressing suicide in the area and where it's affected by sexual orientation and gender identity. As we all know, that's become a big issue in our day. And so I want to give you a few things to think about. Lesbian, gay, and bisexual kids are 3 times more likely than straight kids to attempt suicide at some point in their lives. Medically serious attempts at suicide are 4 times more likely among LGBTQ youth than other young people. African American, Latino, Native American, Asian American people who are LGBTQ attempt suicide at especially high rates. 41% of trans adults, and that's someone who identifies with the opposite gender that they were given at birth, 41% of those said they had attempted suicide. The same study found that 61% of those same people were victims of physical assault, had attempted suicide. And then lesbian, gay, and bisexual young people who come from families that reject or do not accept them are over 8 times more likely to attempt suicide than those whose families accept them. And then it says each time an LGBTQ person is a victim of physical or verbal harassment or abuse, they become 2.5 times more likely to hurt themselves. Now, someone may say, well, the answer is simple. We need to quit hurting their feelings. No, the answer is simple. It's a sin problem.
Yeah.
It is a sin problem. And until, and I think the reason that is such an issue is because we still have just enough moral standard and enough of a moral compass in our country and in this part of the world that it still bothers people when others come out or they say, this is my lifestyle, I'm here, I'm queer, this is what I am. There's still enough of a moral compass and moral foundation about people in this part of the world that they will kick back against that and say, no, that's not right. That's not the way you were raised. That's not, even people that are not religious will kick back against that. Secondly, what I want to say to that is that it goes to show you the unnatural mentality that a person has to go to get to where they think this is okay, this is normal, this is who I am. It has an effect on them. That's not because somebody hurt my feelings and somebody called me a bad name and somebody treated me badly. What that is that conscience that God put inside of every person, and they will never be satisfied trying to fill their life with a bunch of sin and wickedness and perversion.
Right.
So real quickly, we want to go through a few cases in the Bible. Let me say this. Suicide is not a good option. It shouldn't be an option for anybody. There are a few places in the Scripture where we find the act of it we find that someone attempted it. I think the first one that we have found, Brother Keith mentioned, was it Ahithophel? Ahithophel in 2 Samuel, would that be chapter 18?
17.
17. Ahithophel was close to David. And when things didn't go his way, he jumped out, went home, and got his house in order, and he hanged himself. Brother Matt, is there somebody else in there that we're missing?
Yes, sir. I had one more. Abimelech.
Abimelech.
Was the man had a millstone dropped on his head.
Yes.
He did not want to allow the charge of murder to be accounted to that woman, and that would be is that Judges 9?
Judges, yeah.
Judges chapter number 9, I believe, would be Abimelech didn't want that account of murder charged to that woman's account, so he committed suicide himself.
There was also the story of Saul, who was wounded in battle, and it's, you can look at it a couple different ways. He wasn't necessarily committing suicide because there was nothing left to live for, but was probably doing so because, I'm incapacitated, I'm of no good to anybody, and I cannot heal. Let me put myself out of my misery, physically incapable of doing anything else. And so he tried to kill himself and was successful in doing so. And so there's King Saul. And then, of course, when you go over into the New Testament, you'll find Judas, who, again, did not live up to his potential, made bad decisions. And when he sinned against the Lord and against his own conscience, he just couldn't take it, and he went out and hanged himself.
Well, I believe that the Bible shows it sets an example too, because
Yes.
Saul's armor bearer committed suicide as well.
That's right. That is
Saul's
right.
armor bearer did, and
So the influence of it.
right.
Yeah.
1 Kings, is that chapter number 9?
I think
that
it is.
Zimri? Zimri committed suicide as well. Let me see.
And then
I
there is
lost my
another
place here,
there
Charlie.
is another character we want to mention.
To go back to Ahithophel, Brother Michael already mentioned them not living up to their expectation. In that context of Ahithophel, that's 2 Samuel 17 and verse number 23. It's the verse starts out by saying, "And when Ahithophel saw that his counsel was not followed, he saddled his ass and arose, and gat him home to his house, to his city, and put his household in order, and hanged himself, and died."
Wow.
We talked about living up to those expectations.
Expectation. Nobody listens to me. Nobody cares about what I think, and so he just went and
exactly right.
killed himself. There is one more, and there are probably several other examples. These are just the ones that, as we tried to get some together and give you some substance to go with this, these are the ones that stood out to us or that we were able to find fairly easy. But the one that I have always thought was interesting was Elijah. And Elijah, of course, we know that Elijah didn't die, but there came a time in Elijah's life where he's sitting under a juniper tree and he is asking God to kill him. Lord, he says in verse number 4, it is, "Enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am not better than my fathers." Now, one preacher said it like this: he didn't have the guts to kill himself; he wanted God to do it for him. But I don't know if that's proper or not. But it does appear to be that way. That you have Elijah here, and he's just a couple of chapters earlier, or the chapter earlier, he's calling down fire from heaven. 2 chapters before that, God's proving himself to him at the brook.
Yeah.
He's raising people, or he's getting meal out of the barrel for the widow. He's raising people from the dead. There's all kind of things happening. And all of a sudden, he just bottoms out.
Yeah.
And the thing that I think it could be said of Elijah was that he felt like, I'm the only one. And so to me, it was more of a pride issue. And if we would be honest, in probably all situations, it is a pride issue.
Right.
They don't care about me. They don't treat
Well,
me the way I need to be treated.
You was talking about Elijah. That man said that he didn't have the guts to kill himself. I believe that he probably feared God too much, that he wasn't going to let the blame be on himself, but
Absolutely.
he wanted God to have the blame.
Absolutely.
And my personal opinion is, when people do get to that place that they're willing to commit suicide, it's, it's pride, But with that pride, I believe it's a lack of a fear of God.
Sure.
At that point in time, because God
Why would you in your right mind say that?
Yeah,
God just killed me.
The reason that we're against abortion, murder, any of that, suicide, is because God places a sanctity on life.
Yeah.
So when
Oh,
you're
yeah,
willing
absolutely.
to do that, you've come to a point in your life where you no longer fear God. You don't care who, you'll take the blame. And I believe that's probably the difference in Elijah not taking his own life,
Right.
was he hadn't got to that point where he no longer feared God. So
Elijah was a man who done great things for God, but I think at the end of the day, I think because things didn't go the way that he thought they should, I really think pride got the best of him.
Expectations.
Expectation. Let me leave you with this thought. All of Elijah's life and ministry was spent on the good side of Jordan in Canaan land. At the end of his life, he goes across Jordan, and God raptures him out, so to speak, and he dies, or not dies, but he leaves this world, he leaves this life on the wrong side of Jordan. And Brother Ballou posed that question to me years ago, and it's probably been over 10 years ago. And just recently, in the past year, I really believe that this is either the symbolism or maybe the literal interpretation of why God did it that way. When you read through this story, even after God does everything he does to try to tell Elijah, look, I still got people to do this. Notice what he tells Elijah. He says, I want you to get up. I want you to go down, anoint Hazael to be king, get Jehu, anoint him to be king over Israel, and then go get Elisha, anoint him to be the prophet. And he gives him all these things. And he turns around and he says, by the way, I have 7,000 in Israel who have not bowed the knee to Baal. And at the end of it, Elijah up and he leaves and he does what God tells him to do. And it's right after that, Elijah's gone out of here. And I think it is a good picture of, because Elijah did not respond right to when God was trying to talk to him in that whole passage. Elijah never did respond right to none of that. And because of that, it's almost as if God is teaching him a lesson. I have let you live in Canaan all this time and experience my goodness and my blessings. And if you can't be more thankful, and if you can't be more grateful than that, let me carry you over to the other side and just go ahead and take you out.
And let someone else
Let
do
somebody
the work.
else do it. And so while suicide is not a option, shouldn't be an option, you can see in the life of Elijah where his mentality, where his mind and his thought process, it failed to be a biblical mentality the way that it should have been. And so,
Can I just say, I know that we're going way over.
we're in the 38th minute.
If
almost.
lest there be someone that is contemplating or is in this place, we've given a lot of reasons, and Brother Michael has said that it's not the option. It is not a good option. But whether saved or lost, and if you're listening to this, you're more than likely saved. But your comparison is only dangerous for the person doing it.
Yeah.
If any one of us get to a place and pride makes us get to that place where we're always comparing, but God did not call you to have or to be or to do the same things as somebody else.
Right.
Those times in your life where you're trying, and it maybe seems like the only option, may be a time where you are meant to lean on the Lord, and during that time you don't know what the Lord is going to do with your life. And at the end of that valley, it may be a dark, deep valley, and we've seen them. I'm a young man, and I have seen some deep and some dark valleys. But you never know what the Lord is going to do on the other side of that.
Right, that's right.
And what He's doing to mold you and to make you into the person He wants you to be on the other side of that.
Amen. Amen. Friend, if you need help, if you need somebody to talk to, if you just want to have a friend, reach out to us. We'll be glad to talk to you. There are other churches that specialize in dealing in ministries like this. We don't claim to be the experts. We just try to take the Bible and tell you what the Bible says, and then give you some things to hopefully would encourage you to look to the Lord. He is the one to look to. Don't get into a comparison mentality, as Brother Keith said. Look to God, look to the Lord, and let Him lead you and guide you. All right. All right. Well, that's all the time we have today. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you'll continue to tune in here on the Christian Construction Podcast.